In just 47 seconds, Jasmine Crockett dropped a Victoria's Secret bombshell that ripped through the chamber. A single USB exposed Trump laughing with Jeffrey Epstein, surrounded by young models and footage buried for 23 years. The air crackled, the crowd froze, and one woman cried out, "That's my sister." What on that tape was so explosive? It made Trump tremble on live national TV. The red tally light on the C-SPAN camera blinked once, then locked into a cold, unblinking stare. Live. No edits. No mercy. Just one room, one USB, and one woman who refused to be silent. Jasmine Crockett stepped out of the black SUV like she wasn't walking into Congress, but into battle. Her navy blue suit cut the morning haze like a blade. Her expression didn't flicker, not even as the press swarmed. "Congresswoman, is it true you have the Epstein tape?" One reporter shouted. Another leaned closer, voice lower, more desperate. "Is Trump really in it?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Across the street, the CNN broadcast van buzzed with tension. Inside, a producer whispered into his headset, "She brought it. It's real. Get ready." The rumor had started with a leak from someone inside DOJ, an unsealed file, a flash drive recovered from a bankruptcy court record long forgotten. But it wasn't the file. It was what was in the footage, and who. Inside room 316, the Oversight Committee chamber looked like any other morning on Capitol Hill, polished wood. American flags, rows of microphones, but the atmosphere was thick like the air itself was holding its breath. Microphones were already hot. Chairs creaked under the weight of names. Trump sat dead center, flanked by Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene on his right and Jim Jordan on his left, both of them whispering, watching Jasmine like predators sizing up a cornered target. But Jasmine wasn't cornered. In her right hand, she held a sleek silver USB, nothing marked on it, no label, no color, just smooth metal and a truth sharp enough to cut through decades of lies. Her team walked behind her in tight formation, eyes forward, but they knew what the world didn't. They'd seen it, all 97 seconds of it. They'd watched in a silent hotel room the night before, as Epstein and Trump laughed on camera surrounded by girls who looked like high school students in angel wings. And now America was about to see it too. Crockett moved toward her seat like a clock striking its final hour. Every step echoed. Every footfall was measured like she was counting the distance between her and history. Trump didn't look at her, but the twitch in his jaw gave him away. Greene leaned in and hissed, "She's bluffing. She wouldn't dare." Trump's lips barely moved, but Jasmine caught it anyway. He muttered just two words under his breath. "She won't, but she would." And she had waited years for this. She sat, slowly, carefully, her hands still resting on the USB like it was an artifact not of evidence, but of reckoning. Outside the building, the crowd had grown. Staffers, press, even a few protesters with signs that read, "You knew." One held up a poster of a girl in a white dress with a black bar over her eyes. The caption underneath read, "Epstein's Angels." Inside, the chairman banged the gavel once. "This hearing is now in session." Jasmine didn't look up. She looked at the camera, and then, still calm, still silent, she whispered to no one and everyone, "Let's see what they tried to bury. What kind of truth makes a man like Trump sweat in silence?" The gavel dropped once, then silence returned, tense, deliberate. The chairman adjusted his glasses and called the name like it was just another line on the docket. "Mr. Donald J. Trump, you may begin." Trump leaned forward, hands folded, like a man about to deliver a monologue, not a defense. He didn't speak right away. He smiled first, that crooked, smug smile he'd worn for decades. The smile of a man who thought charm could erase history. Then he turned toward Jasmine Crockett and let it rip. "She's a puppet," he said, waving a hand lazily in her direction, as if swatting a fly. "A woke puppet with no credentials and no clue. Just a mouthpiece for the media." Laughter broke out in the far-right section of the chamber. Marjorie Taylor Greene chuckled loudest. Jim Jordan smirked, but kept his eyes locked on Jasmine. Somewhere in the gallery, a Fox News cameraman zoomed in on Trump's grin. The moment was theater. Ugly, deliberate theater. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stared dead center like she was looking through him. Trump leaned back, arms spread like a king on a throne. "I've built towers. She builds hashtags. I've negotiated peace deals. She negotiates retweets. We're not in the same league, folks." Laughter rippled, cameras flashed. Green leaned in low and sharp. She's not qualified. She's lucky to be here. Jasmine turned slow, precise. Her expression didn't change, but the air did. She heard it, logged it, and filed it where all underestimations go. The chairman cleared his throat. Ms. Crockett, would you like to respond? She didn't rise yet, just brushed the silver USB with her fingers like a loaded trigger. Yes, she said. The chamber stiffened. Even Green felt it. Trump turned halfway in his chair, eyebrows lifted as if daring her to speak out of line. Jasmine stood. She looked first to the chairman, then to the cameras, then finally to Trump. I've been called worse, she said, voice calm as iron. But I wasn't invited here to trade insults. I was elected to tell the truth, whether you like the sound of it or not. No applause, no outburst, just stillness, sharp and heavy. Jasmine reached into her folder and pulled out a document, but not the USB. Not yet. The anticipation grew like a fuse. Everyone could feel it. Something was coming, but she was making them wait. I will respond, she added, but not with slogans. Not with slogans wrapped in smirks. I'll respond with facts. You remember what those are? Mr. Trump, a few gasps, one or two chuckles from her side of the chamber. Even Jordan's smirk faltered. Trump's face twitched barely, but it was enough. She sat back down. No USB, no reveal. Just silence. Controlled, sharpened silence. The kind that makes liars sweat. If silence is Jasmine's weapon, what's she waiting for? The screen crackled back to life. Static shimmered for half a second before the frame locked in place, grainy, dim, but unmistakably real. The camera angle was tilted slightly as if hidden behind a speaker or champagne tower, but the faces it caught were clear enough to burn. Jeffrey Epstein entered first, wearing a pale cream jacket, with a glass of champagne already in hand. He was smiling, no grinning, with the confidence of a man who thought the world owed him its daughters. Behind him came Donald Trump, younger, thinner, but unmistakable. His tie slightly loose, a drink in his right hand, his left resting casually on the back of a young woman's chair. Melania stood beside him, expression unreadable. She glanced at the camera once, then looked away. Jasmine narrowed her eyes. That look wasn't surprise, it was calculation. The lounge was dim lit by gold chandeliers and pink uplights. A banner hung in the corner, Victoria's Secret Private Suite, invite only. The music was soft jazz muffled through velvet drapes. Trump sat down next to Epstein, their shoulders nearly touching. They laughed, loud, brash, familiar. Not two men who had just met. Two men who'd done this before. Then she appeared. The girl. Long brown hair, white dress. Heels too high for her age. She couldn't have been older than 18, probably younger. She sat on Epstein's lap, smiling awkwardly, sipping something clear from a flute. Trump leaned in, whispered something directly into her ear. She laughed nervously. On the chamber floor, a staffer dropped her pen. Green looked away. Jim Jordan clenched his jaw. The video kept playing. Trump raised his glass and looked directly at the camera, waving like he was hosting a fundraiser. They're younger this time, he said, audible, even through the static. Epstein chuckled beside him, replying, much younger. Gasps rippled across the room. One aide stood abruptly, face pale, hand to mouth. Another murmured, "Oh my God." The chairman leaned forward, lips parted, but no words came. Even the media team in the back froze. No one knew whether to pause the video or let it play. Trump, seated just feet from the screen, said nothing. His eyes were fixed, locked onto his own face from 26 years ago. The smile, the voice of the drink, it was him. There was no room left for denial, no lighting trick, no AI claim, no spin. Jasmine stayed silent, her hands folded, her breath steady. She didn't look at the footage anymore. She looked at the people watching it, watching themselves watch it, and realizing what they'd enabled. The girl stood from Epstein's lap unsteady. Trump placed his hand on her back to guide her away, palm pressed too low, lingering too long. She walked out of frame. Trump and Epstein clinked glasses. Then the screen glitched. The footage, blurred, jumped forward a few frames, then froze on one final shot. Epstein and Trump, mid-laugh, surrounded by two young faces and too many secrets. The screen went black, and this time no one moved. Not the staffers, not the lawmakers, not the press. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene had her head down, hands clasped tightly in her lap. A single reporter whispered to another, This changes everything." Jasmine spoke only once. She turned toward Trump, still silent, still stone, and said quietly, "You called it fake, but the camera never lies, especially when the liar's in the room." What happens when the lie is recorded and the liar is in the room? The screen was still black when the explosion came not from the speakers, but from Trump himself. He shot up from his seat, face flushed, a shade past red jaw clenched like it might snap. "Fake!" he barked, pointing at the monitor as if it had insulted him personally. "That was altered, deepfake garbage. CNN lies just like always." His voice cracked at the edges, louder than the gavel, louder than the room. Aide after aide turned toward him, stunned. Cameras caught the sweat above his brow, the way his hand trembled just slightly. Green reached for his arm to pull him down, but he shook her off. "This is a hit job, a setup. That girl in the tape, I don't even know her." Jasmine remained seated, still, composed. One hand rested on the desk, fingers gently tapping. The other opened a thin red folder beside her, slow and steady. From it, she pulled a printed document, holding it like a courtroom exhibit. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "This is a third-party forensic report," she said, "clearly conducted by an independent data integrity lab." She turned to face the chairman, then let her gaze fall on Trump. "It confirms the timestamp file, hash video, encoding, and original upload metadata. Chain of custody intact. No manipulation. No edits." She handed it to the clerk, who passed it up the line like a holy relic. Reppers Jamie Raskin leaned into his mic, voice controlled, but cold. This footage was sealed in a bankruptcy court filing in 2001, connected to the Epstein estate, marked confidential until it was unsealed 2 weeks ago. That's where her team found it. Not CNN, not social media, a federal archive. Trump's attorney sprang to his feet, flustered and breathless. "Objection. That evidence was not disclosed before this hearing. We move to strike it from the record." The chairman raised a brow. "Motion denied. The evidence is admissible under public record statute." The lawyer sat down like a man who knew the foundation was cracking. Trump laughed, but it was brittle. "This is political theater. You're letting some TikTok lawyer smear the president of the United States with grainy club footage." "Really?" Jasmine finally turned toward him slowly, like a gun turret locking onto a target. "That grainy footage," she said softly, "was enough to make you stand up and scream." A few people gasped. Others stayed silent, hanging on every syllable. For the first time, it wasn't just Jasmine versus Trump. It was the truth versus the room. And the truth had just taken its first breath. When the evidence breathes, will the power still lie? The air hadn't moved since Jasmine's last sentence, as if the oxygen had turned to glass. The video was over. The evidence laid bare. Trump had collapsed into silence, hunched slightly, blinking too often. But then, before anyone could speak again, it came from the gallery. A voice, raw, trembling, human. "That's my sister," the woman said, rising from the second row, her fingers white-knuckled on the bench before her. "She was 17. Her voice cracked halfway through the word, 17, and the sound sliced straight through the walls, through the wood, through every last veil of denial in the room. Gasps followed. Chairs shifted. One staffer covered her mouth, eyes glassy. Green's head whipped around toward the voice, panic flickering in her eyes. Trump didn't turn. The woman's hands shook. She held a crumpled photo in one, worn at the corners, folded and unfolded too many times. "That was her on Epstein's lap," she said louder now. "She was in that dress. She left that night, and we never saw her again." Silence devoured the chamber. Even the press didn't reach for their phones. No one moved. Jasmine rose from her seat without a word. No dramatics, no permission. Just motion with purpose. Her heels echoed softly on the marble as she crossed the floor, not toward Trump, but toward the woman in the gallery. As she approached, the woman's lips trembled. She looked ready to collapse. Jasmine reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a single folded tissue. It wasn't symbolic. It was real. She handed it to the woman, gently, eyes never leaving hers. "You are not alone," Jasmine said, then leaned in closer, her voice low, steady. "And we're not done." The woman nodded, clutching the tissue like a lifeline. Someone in the gallery started to cry. Reporters scribbled furiously, now heads down. One of them whispered into a live mic, "A witness just identified her missing sister. From the footage, this hearing has officially changed everything." The camera feed cut briefly to black before returning. Nothing could clean this up now. The chairman's gavel hovered but didn't fall. Trump's face was blank, hollow, a man staring at the ghost of a lie too large to bury. Jasmine didn't return to her seat immediately. She stood for a moment beside the woman, not as a politician, but as a human shield. She turned slightly, looking at the gallery, then to the cameras, her voice cool but unshakable. She was 17. She didn't vote. She didn't run for office. She didn't stand behind a podium. But she mattered. And then she walked back slowly, deliberately, as if every step was for the names no one remembered. If this is just one sister, how many are still silent? The moment the gavel hit to recess, Trump's team moved like a breached dam. Suits flying, phones pressed to ears, voices rising behind clenched teeth. Two aides grabbed his briefcase, one snatched his coat, and Marjorie Taylor Greene stormed ahead like a general in retreat. "Get a release out! Blame the deep fakes now!" she barked, already typing furiously into her phone, fingers shaking. Trump didn't speak. He just walked fast, head down, a ghost chased by his own face on a screen. Behind them, the hearing room stayed still, cool, tense eyes lingering on the door that had just slammed shut behind power. Jasmine remained seated, surrounded by a storm she had summoned, but untouched by its fury. Her notes were spread neatly in front of her, her pen uncapped but unused. She wasn't celebrating. She was preparing. What they had just seen was only the surface. She hadn't even touched the documents in the sealed envelope. Outside the Capitol, reporters crowded the barricades like moths drawn to something burning. Microphones shoved toward every person exiting the building. "Did you see the tape? Do you believe her now? Is this the end for him?" Green shoved past them, muttering about CGI, digital manipulation, Hollywood tricks. "It's a lie. It's always been a lie." Her voice cracked when she said it. Inside Fox News headquarters, panic had a different flavor. The control room lit up with alerts. Segment producers screamed over headsets. "Cut to B-roll, pull back to commercial." But it was too late. Viewers had already clipped it, posted it, shared it. The hashtag Epstein Trump tape exploded on X, then Instagram, then Facebook. No algorithm could outrun it. The footage was everywhere, and in every repost, Jasmine's face stayed frozen on screen like a statue carved in resolve. One host tried to spin it. "We're reviewing the authenticity of the footage. There's reason to believe this is part of a larger coordinated smear." But even as she spoke, her own producers replaced her with a breaking news chyron. GOP witness identifies missing sister in Trump Epstein tape. Jasmine finally stood and began collecting her papers with quiet precision. Her staff leaned in, whispering about press requests, requests from the DOJ, requests from networks. She held up one hand. "We're not answering yet," she said. "We're listening." One aide blinked. Listening to who? She looked toward the gallery, the spot where the woman had stood, where the silence had broken, where history had shifted. "To them," she said, "the people who never had a mic before today." Out in the hallway, a cameraman caught Trump snapping at a reporter. "It's not real, none of it. She'll regret this." But his voice cracked mid-sentence, lost under the roar of the press, the clicks of shutters, the chants already echoing from the Capitol steps. Inside, Jasmine stayed behind, not to rest, to reload. What do you do when the broadcast can't be turned off? The chamber was quieter now, but not because the tension had left. It had simply changed form. After the video, after the sister, after the storm, what remained was sharper than outrage. It was reckoning. Jasmine rose again, her voice requested, then recognized by the chairman, with a nod heavier than protocol. "I request time to address the judiciary," she said. Not loud, not meek, just clear like truth should sound. The room stirred as she approached the mic, notepad in hand, USB still within reach. But she didn't touch it this time. Her eyes swept across the committee, pausing briefly on faces both familiar and hostile. Then she began, not with fire, but with facts. Over the last decade, we've seen a trail, one that snakes quietly through sealed donations, closed-door settlements, and names scrubbed clean from public logs. But the pattern remains. She clicked once on her pen. Epstein donated 6 figures to shell PACs linked to Trump properties. At least 4 NDAs sealed, tied directly to campaign contribution routing accounts. One woman's silence cost $180,000. That's less than a Mar-a-Lago gala dinner. Gasps were stifled, heads turned, pens scribbled. Across the aisle, Representative Dan Bishop looked ready to object. He didn't. He knew better now. Jasmine continued. "We have visitor logs from Mar-a-Lago 1998 through 2002. One entry listed only as J.D. Minor escorted by Epstein. Ishkum, those records are sealed. This Congress never asked why. She looked directly at the committee chair. But I am. Trump scoffed from the witness table, throwing his hands up. This is a witch hunt. You're just reading garbage from conspiracy blogs. He turned toward the chairman. Are we really allowing this circus to continue? The chairman didn't look at him. Mr. Trump, you are not recognized. You will wait. Trump slumped back into his seat, but his foot tapped restlessly. He was losing ground and he knew it. Jasmine didn't even flinch. When victims signed those NDAs, they didn't know they were signing pieces of themselves away. They were told it was the only way to survive. But the money didn't save them. It silenced them. And the people who took those checks, the ones who wrote them, walked away wearing tuxedos in power. The screens behind her flashed to sealed court docket numbers, redacted lines, PAC transfers. Trump's name wasn't on every page, but his shadow was. She stepped back from the podium, let the silence hang for a moment. Let it settle into every camera lens and every conscience. Either this Congress cares about victims, she said slowly, or it only cares when the cameras are off. Dead quiet. Even Green didn't move. Rep. Jamie Raskin leaned forward, hand-steepled eyes locked on Jasmine, like she'd just carved something permanent into the record. A CNN producer whispered into a headset, "We're not cutting away. Keep the feed live. This is history." Jasmine exhaled once, not from exhaustion, but release. She had more, much more. But she knew when to stop right before the truth became unbearable. She returned to her seat, not finished, just resetting. Can a woman with one USB hold the line against decades of silence? She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The room was already leaning in breath, caught between the last syllable and whatever was about to follow. Jasmine Crockett reached into her folder again, fingers moving with surgical calm, and pulled out a single-page document, faded at the edges, stamped in federal ink. This she began holding it up between two fingers, like a lit match, is a wire transfer dated April 3rd, 2001. Amount $750,000. Sender a Trump-affiliated PAC called Freedom West. Recipient a Delaware holding company that no longer exists. But at the time, it was used to funnel money into one thing, Jeffrey Epstein's legal defense fund. Gasps rippled across the panel like a shockwave. Several lawmakers leaned forward at once, eyes darting to the screen as the document appeared blown up and crystal clear. The details were undeniable. Account numbers, routing codes, bank confirmation. Jasmine had redacted nothing. Trump's face shifted. The arrogance drained from his jawline. He leaned toward his lawyer and whispered, audible enough for the front row to hear, "They found it." Raskin's mic came on with a low buzz. "I request a formal subpoena to unseal the full transaction logs of Freedom West and its related affiliates from 1999 to 2002. He turned to the chairman. "Effective immediately." The chairman nodded grimly. Motion received. Trump's lawyer stammered, trying to recover. "This proves nothing. It's a coincidence. Political donations are often misinterpreted. It doesn't establish intent, let alone misconduct." Jasmine cut in, unblinking. "Then why was it routed through a shell corporation, registered under a post office box in Wilmington, Delaware, the same P.O. box Epstein used to register his jet silence?" Then murmurs. Then a CNN anchor whispering over the live feed. This just escalated from scandal to possible federal crime. Jasmine walked back to the podium, set the document down like a stone hitting water. "We've talked about footage, about girls, about NDAs, but money leaves footprints even when the people do not. And this footprint leads from a PAC office in Manhattan to a prison cell that never got to testify." Trump didn't move. His hands were clasped now, knuckles white. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't speak. Jordan had begun flipping through his notes, pretending to be busy, but nothing could outrun the numbers printed in black and white. The room wasn't boiling anymore. It was freezing. Because when you follow the money and the money leads back to the Oval Office, the questions don't end. They multiply. Jasmine returned to her seat again, slow, methodical. She had set the next wave in motion. If the money trails back to the Oval Office, what else does it lead to? The backlash wasn't slow, it was immediate, calculated, and venomous. Within hours of the hearing, conservative media lit up like a bonfire. Woke witch hunt screamed one headline on a morning broadcast. Jasmine's revenge circus ranted another as footage of her calmly presenting evidence was twisted into freeze frames that made her look aggressive, smug, unstable. Talk show hosts called her a dangerous extremist, the new face of radical feminism, a pawn of the deep state. But this wasn't just noise from the airwaves. It got personal. Jasmine's congressional office in Dallas was found the next morning with its windows cracked and the words liar and traitor scrawled in red spray paint. Her voicemail filled with threats, some explicit, some coded, all menacing. "You're digging too deep," one caller warned. "You think you're brave, but brave women end up dead." Her team huddled in a closed-door session, visibly shaken. One staffer, barely 25, admitted through tears she'd received a photo of her apartment door taken from the outside just hours after reposting Jasmine's speech on social media. Another aide begged her, "Just pause even for a day. We're not prepared for this kind of war." Jasmine listened to every word. She nodded. Then she said quietly, "Neither were they the girls." That night, while security did another sweep of her office, Jasmine sat alone reviewing her case notes. But the legal documents blurred and memory took over. It came back all at once, a courtroom in Texas 5 years ago, and a trembling 16-year-old girl in a hoodie 2 sizes too big. Her name was Amariah. No family in the room, no press. Just Jasmine, a public defender, then standing between her and a system that wanted to call her a runaway instead of a victim. Amariah had been recruited by a so-called modeling scout at a Greyhound station, promised stardom, handed a bus ticket, then locked in a motel room for 6 days. "They told me it was a test shoot," the girl had whispered. But there were no cameras, just men. One of them had a badge. Jasmine had fought like hell to get the case seen as trafficking, not loitering. She'd won. But the sentence, probation for the recruiter. No record for the man with the badge. Just silent, sealed files and one more girl swallowed by shadows. That night, Jasmine didn't sleep. She watched the news spin her face into a villain's. She read the comments filled with venom. But all she saw was Amariah, and all she heard were the words that had echoed for years. "They told me it was modeling, but it was never about pictures." Now the stage was bigger, the predators, richer, the victims buried deeper. But the pattern hadn't changed. Only now the country was watching. Her staff sent a draft statement for damage control. She didn't even open it. She wasn't here to manage outrage. She was here to ignite it. When the system protects predators, who protects the truth? The press conference wasn't held inside the Capitol. It was outside in the wind beneath a gray sky that felt like it was waiting to crack. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder, umbrellas half raised as the cameras zoomed in on the steps where 3 lawmakers stood together, not as politicians, but as a line refusing to break. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamie Raskin, and Cory Booker flanked the podium, their faces grim, their message clear. AOC was the first to speak. Her voice didn't rise. It cut. Jasmine Crockett is not alone. What we witnessed in that hearing wasn't a smear campaign, it was sunlight. And for some, sunlight hurts. She paused, glancing directly at the Fox News mic planted at the front of the podium. "Good." Then Raskin stepped forward, sleeves rolled, jaw tight. "This isn't about partisanship. This is about power abused, hidden, and now exposed." He held up a folder thick with subpoena drafts. "We are demanding that the Department of Justice appoint a special counsel to investigate every name, every transfer, every sealed file connected to the Epstein estate and Mr. Trump's campaigns." The crowd murmured. Reporters fired questions. "Do you believe Jasmine Crockett's life is in danger? Are there others coming forward? Why now?" Booker didn't wait for silence. He didn't need it. He stepped to the mic with no notes in hand, just fire in his eyes. "Silence is complicity," he said. "And Jasmine, she's breaking that silence. That's why they're coming for her. That's why the threats are flooding in. Because the system never feared victims, it fears witnesses who won't shut up." Inside the Capitol, Jasmine watched the feed from a quiet hallway. No staff around, no press, just her and the echo of words she didn't ask for, but needed to hear. She didn't flinch at the threats, but she registered everyone. Every slur, every warning, every breathless voicemail trying to scare her into quitting. She wasn't moved by the cameras, the headlines, or the sudden wave of hashtags calling her a hero. She didn't want a statue. She wanted subpoenas. She wanted trial dates. She wanted men who smirked in sealed courtrooms to start sweating in open ones. An aide entered, phone in hand. "C-SPAN wants another interview," he said. "So does NPR, and MSNBC is offering a primetime slot." Jasmine didn't look up from her notes. "No," she said. "Not until the next hearing." He hesitated. "Do you want me to prepare a statement at least?" She finally looked up. "No. Let them keep talking. I'm not here for speeches. I'm here to finish what I started." The aide nodded, then turned away a little taller than when he entered. Something about Jasmine's calm wasn't just inspiring, it was dangerous to the right people. Outside, as the press conference ended, a reporter called out Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. What happens if Trump walks away from this untouched AOC? Turned back eyes, sharp voice like glass. Then the rest of us don't. What happens when the storm stops being political and starts being personal? It broke during primetime. CNN's lower third flashed in red. Exclusive. Former Epstein employee comes forward. The screen cut to a woman sitting in partial shadow, voice steady, but laced with years of forced silence. She didn't blink much. Her hands stayed folded in her lap, but every sentence she spoke felt like a hammer crashing through 20 years of denial. I worked at Epstein's Palm Beach home from 1995 to 1999, she said. I saw Donald Trump there. Multiple times. He came alone sometimes with Mr. Epstein, sometimes not. He didn't sign in through the front. They used the side entrance, the one the media never saw. The anchor leaned forward, visibly shaken. Did you ever see Mr. Trump interact with minors? The woman didn't flinch. Yes. One of the girls he spoke to was the same one in that tape Congress just aired. America held its breath. Twitter exploded within minutes. She saw Trump trended by the hour. The hearing room, already under floodlights, now boiled with reporters demanding a response. Jasmine Crockett watched from her office, elbows on her desk, face unreadable. But when her aide asked if she'd seen the clip, she simply said yes. And after a long pause, she's not the only one. At 9:47 p.m. Rep. Jamie Raskin formally requested an emergency extension of the hearing. New testimony has emerged that directly contradicts sworn statements made by Mr. Trump under oath. This committee has a duty to reopen the floor. The chairman agreed. A 2 a.m. vote passed. Capitol Security was instructed to prepare for a new witness list. Across the city, Trump's legal team scrambled. One lawyer called CNN criminally irresponsible. Another threatened litigation against any network that aired uncorroborated slander. But it didn't matter. The woman had sworn an affidavit. Her statement was already in the congressional record. She wasn't backing down, and she wasn't alone. Jasmine reviewed the woman's file in silence. A former housekeeper. No criminal history, no political donations, just a job, a memory, and now a voice that couldn't be ignored. Jasmine tapped her pen, once then reached for the second folder in her desk drawer, one marked with a single word: witnesses. There were 5 names inside, all women. One of them, Maritza Delgado, age 42, was still alive. A former aspiring model from El Paso, she had escaped Epstein's circle in 2001, but only after 2 abortions and a year in silence. She was now ready to speak, not on camera, not in a memoir, but under oath. Jasmine circled Maritza's name with a red pen. This wouldn't just be about the dead anymore. It was about the ones who had survived and were willing to return to the fire. The next hearing wasn't scheduled. It was inevitable. Outside, reporters huddled under streetlights, reading from their phones, faces lit by screens. One whispered into a mic, "What we're watching isn't just a hearing anymore. It's a reckoning unfolding in real time." Inside, Jasmine stood at her window, watching the Capitol glow beneath the midnight sky. Behind her, the city was shaking, but she stood still, unmoved. The cracks are widening. What breaks next? The hearing resumed in silence, not out of respect, but because every person in that room was bracing for impact. Jasmine didn't speak as she approached the podium again. She simply inserted a second USB into the congressional display console. The screen flickered, then snapped to a familiar setting, a previous deposition from Donald Trump under oath recorded in 2019. The video played. Trump's voice echoed across the chamber. "I've never been to Jeffrey Epstein's residence. I wouldn't even know where it is." He was calm in the clip, almost smug, wearing a red tie and a practiced face. Jasmine stood motionless as the footage ran, arms at her sides, her expression unreadable. Then, with a press of the spacebar, she paused it. "Let's test that," she said. She turned and the screen changed again, this time to a scan of a faded guestbook page from Epstein's Palm Beach estate. The date at the top read March 19th, 1997, and scrawled in thick black ink, unmistakable and sharp, Donald J. Trump. Right below it, 2 guests, private entry. The room stiffened. Several gasps broke the silence like glass cracking under pressure. Marjorie Taylor Greene paled. Trump didn't move. His face was still, but his knuckles were white against the edge of the desk. Jasmine continued, her voice colder, now more surgical. This is Epstein's house log entered into sealed evidence by Palm Beach County in 2008. It was found last week in a mislabeled box during a court-ordered records audit. You claimed under oath that you'd never been there. She turned and locked eyes with Trump, not like an accuser, but like someone confirming a death sentence already signed. You didn't lie to me, she said. You lied to the people. A murmur rolled across the committee bench. Reppers Jamie Raskin leaned forward, eyebrows raised, already drafting questions in his mind. Aides whispered. Cameras zoomed. Journalists scrambled for screenshots. Trump finally broke his silence. I don't recall signing that. Could have been planted. A forgery. People sign names all the time. Jasmine nodded slowly, which is why we had it verified. The screen changed again, this time to a handwriting analysis, side-by-side signatures from Trump's tax filings, real estate deeds, and the guest book. Matched, identical, unshakable. And just so we're clear, Jasmine added, turning back to the panel, lying under oath to this body is a federal crime. A crime with consequences. Trump didn't respond. He couldn't. His lawyers shifted uneasily. Green avoided the camera. Jim Jordan sat rigid, pretending to write notes he would never read again. Jasmine closed the file with a soft thud, then leaned forward just enough for the microphone to catch her final words. The question isn't whether he lied. It's whether we still care when someone does. She returned to her seat without looking back. The truth was now on record. What oath holds value if no one bleeds for breaking it? Jasmine didn't raise her voice when she returned to the podium. She didn't need to. By now, the silence followed her like a shadow, heavy, expectant, afraid. She opened a manila folder with a single label across the top, bankruptcy court file, Epstein Estate 2001, sealed. The air shifted. A ripple of tension moved through the room like a pulse before a collapse. This document, she began, was never supposed to see daylight. She held it up, pages yellowed slightly with time but intact. It was sealed under judicial order during Jeffrey Epstein's Chapter 11 bankruptcy proceedings in 2001. The presiding judge marked it confidential, citing business privacy and irreparable damage to unnamed financial stakeholders. She paused. But one copy was leaked 2 weeks ago to a reporter who sent it straight to my office. Trump stiffened in his chair. Green leaned in, eyes darting to the folder. His lawyers whispered furiously, but Jasmine had already placed a scanned version on the digital display. Page 11, column 3, line 47, underwriting contracts, Victoria's Elite Model Series, 1997-2000, anonymous partial underwriter, DT Holdings, LLC, linked address 725 Fifth Ave, New York City, Trump Tower. The room didn't gasp this time. It froze. Jasmine let the silence deepen before speaking again. These are not modeling contracts for print ads. These were recruiting agreements run through Epstein's private network and funded by outside contributors, most of them anonymous, until now. She turned to the committee. Trump Tower appears 3 times in this file, once as a mailing address, twice as a financial anchor. He wasn't just attending the shows, he was helping bankroll them. Trump lurched forward, mouth open, about to speak, but his lawyer put a hand on his arm. The camera caught it, a silent plea to shut up. Trump didn't argue. He just leaned back, slowly, blinking too hard. Jasmine clicked again. The screen changed now, showing the names of 5 shell companies listed as co-funders. 4 dissolved, 1 still active, registered in Delaware. The same company listed in the wire transfer she'd revealed days earlier. Raskin turned to his aide and whispered, "Subpoena it all." But Jasmine wasn't done. She flipped to page 14. The room followed her movement like it was watching a live wire being pulled taut. She read aloud carefully, "Signatories and beneficiaries of promotional modeling agreements shall remain confidential per clause, 12b unless compelled by criminal subpoena." She looked up. This means the girls, most of them, were never named, never found. But here's what matters. She flipped again, this time, revealing a list of contract reference numbers. One of these matches a ledger entry Epstein made the night of the Victoria's Secret event in the footage you all saw. That girl may not have been invited. She may have been contracted. Gasps now, audible, painful. Jasmine didn't blink. The question isn't just who funded these events, she said. The question is, who did they fund? Who disappeared beneath these contracts, these numbers, these deals that never saw a courtroom? Trump stared at the screen like he was watching himself vanish. No one on his side spoke. Not Green, Not Jordan, not the lawyers, because this wasn't a scandal anymore. It was a ledger, with a girl inside it. What if the missing girl in the tape was part of a signed deal? The air had shifted, not just in the room but across the country. Something invisible had cracked beneath the desk behind the cameras, under the weight of years and names and ledgers that were never meant to be read aloud. Donald Trump's eyes had lost their focus. His fingers no longer fidgeted. They simply gripped the edge of the table like a man holding on to the last lie that still listened. Then he stood. No cue, no warning, just rage under skin too tight to contain it. His chair scraped back violently, the sound screeching through the chamber like metal across bone. Reporters froze mid-sentence. Phones tilted. Security straightened, but didn't stop him. They knew this wasn't an escape, it was a surrender in motion. "I'm done," Trump growled, voice brittle and breaking. "This is beneath the presidency, beneath this country." His lawyer tried to intercept, to hold him back with one final legal whisper, but he shrugged it off like a fly. Marjorie Taylor Greene called out after him, "Don't give them the win," but he was already pushing open the side door, already stepping into the hallway, as if he could outrun the screen still frozen behind him. On that screen, the guest book, his signature. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't glance back. She didn't even smirk. She simply stood and walked toward the center of the chamber, calm and deliberate, then turned not to the committee, not to the chairman, but directly to the live camera feeding out to the country. Her voice was low, unwavering. "He may leave this room, but he won't leave this moment." The words landed like a gavel, louder than any judge could swing. Outside, the press swarmed the hallway, flashbulbs like lightning. Trump moved through it like a man being pulled, not walking, jaw-clenched, eyes forward, hands fists. But even through the noise, the chants, the scrambling media circus, a single sentence from inside the chamber bled through every screen, every feed, every live stream across the country. "He won't leave this moment." The clip was clipped, reposted, transcribed, captioned in all caps, shared by survivors, stitched into speeches. The truth wasn't in the exit, it was in the echo. Back inside, Jasmine returned to her seat. She didn't look satisfied. She looked resolute. Around her aides and members sat stunned, unsure whether to speak or sit or breathe. But she breathed just fine. Because Trump's walkout wasn't power, it was panic. It was what happens when the lies no longer recognize their maker. And the people watching. They weren't asking where he went. They were asking why he ran. Will the nation follow the man or the mirror he refused to look into? By morning, the streets were no longer quiet. Across D.C., in front of federal buildings, courthouses, news stations, the crowds gathered. Some wore black, others held signs. But all of them carried one phrase printed in red, across cardboard, across T-shirts, across their chests. "She showed us the tape." It spread faster than any press release. Survivors from California to Georgia marched in silence, fists raised, tape drawn across their mouths until they reached the cameras. Then they peeled it off. One woman stood at the Capitol steps, voice cracking through a megaphone. "They told us to forget, but she made them remember." Online, the internet caught fire. "She showed us the tape" trended in 32 states within hours. Cable anchors struggled to keep up. Late-night shows scrapped comedy for commentary. Jasmine's name wasn't just in the news, it was in poems and songs, in the fists of daughters who saw themselves for the first time in someone who wouldn't blink. But for every tribute came a threat. Jasmine's inbox flooded emails with no subject lines, just coordinates. Envelopes with no return addresses, just bullet casings. Voicemails that whispered, "We're coming." Her security team tripled. The Capitol Police offered around-the-clock surveillance. She refused the escort. She didn't want fear following her into every room, but fear had already found her mother. The phone rang just past midnight, the voice on the other end raw with worry. "Are you safe, baby?" her mother asked. "You're all over the news. They've got your picture in their crosshairs." Jasmine stood at her window watching protesters down below chant her name like a war cry and a prayer. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just said softly, "Not yet. But I'm louder than their silence now." That silence, once used like a weapon, was crumbling. It couldn't hold against the noise she had unleashed. It couldn't muffle the voices that now shouted beside hers. Victims were stepping forward in state after state. Sheltered NDAs were being reopened. Law students were analyzing bankruptcy filings like they were gospel. And somewhere inside the Department of Justice, Sealed records began to shake under subpoenas they could no longer ignore. The storm she'd stirred wasn't political anymore. It was personal, and it was everywhere. An anchor on MSNBC said it best that evening. What Jasmine Crockett has done isn't just show a tape. She's forced America to stare at its own reflection and ask what it's willing to deny just to stay comfortable. Jasmine turned off the lights in her office, still awake, still moving. Her body ached. Her voice was raw, but her resolve sharper than ever. She wasn't afraid of the noise. She had become the noise. What is the cost of courage in a country that fears its own truth? The chamber was packed, not with noise, but with history pressing against every wall. The vote had been called. The air held its breath as roll was read one name at a time, each echoing louder than the last. 7 voices for, 4 against. The final gavel didn't just fall, it landed like a verdict. The Oversight Committee by majority recommended a full federal investigation into Donald Trump's financial ties to Jeffrey Epstein. It was official. Within the hour, the Department of Justice issued a statement. A preliminary inquiry would begin into campaign finance irregularities, sealed NDAs, and potential witness tampering spanning 2 decades. No names were cleared. No dates were off limits. Everything Jasmine had exposed was now under the microscope of federal law. The media roared outside, shoving microphones into every open hand, every unspoken mouth. Flashes strobed through the Capitol hallway like lightning trapped in marble. Cameramen shouted. Anchors rushed to get in position. "Where's Crockett?" they asked. "Is she giving a statement? Will she speak tonight?" She didn't. She said nothing. She just walked. Jasmine stepped out of the chamber with her coat over one arm, her bag slung low, her heels striking the marble not with pride but with precision. It had started to rain. The kind of rain that didn't pour, it whispered. Cold, straight, unrelenting. The kind that reminded you Washington had no seasons, just weather that mirrored mood. No umbrella, no entourage. Just her and the storm. An aide caught up beside her, holding a phone. "CNN wants you at 9. Rachel Maddow offered the closing segment. Even Colbert's team, as Jasmine raised a hand gently. The aide stopped talking. This wasn't a moment for celebration. It was a moment to let the noise pass. Behind her, the Capitol glowed gold against the gray sky, but she didn't look back. She didn't wave. She didn't gesture to the cameras. Because what mattered wasn't the applause. It was the ground that had shifted beneath the feet of power, quietly and forever. Someone shouted her name from the barricades. She kept walking. Because the vote was done. The machine had moved, and now the truth had its own legal momentum. Inside the hearing room, lawmakers were already arguing again. Talking points being written. Spin machines heating up. But outside, in the hush of rainfall and the footsteps of a woman who never needed permission, something deeper had been set in motion. No press release could frame it, no counter-narrative could swallow it, and no one, not even a former president, could walk far enough to outrun it now. Jasmine didn't leave that building as a politician tonight. She left as a fault line. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks in silence. The request came quietly, not through a news anchor or congressional aide, but through a folded note handed off by a security officer. No press, no camera, just a line written in shaky blue ink. "The woman from the gallery, she wants to see you. Just you." Jasmine read it once, folded it back, and nodded. Some meetings didn't need scheduling. They met in a side room of the Capitol walls, bare lights low. The woman was already seated, a thin manila envelope resting in her lap, hands clenched over it like it might break if she let go. Her face was pale lips, chapped eyes rimmed with a grief that never truly left. But when she looked up at Jasmine, she didn't flinch. She looked like someone who had waited years just to speak and no longer needed words. Jasmine didn't sit right away. She stepped forward and stood beside the woman in silence. It wasn't hesitation, it was reverence. She knew the weight of what sat inside that envelope. The woman opened it slowly and slid a single photo across the table. It was a girl, 17 maybe. Long dark hair, crooked smile eyes, lit with a kind of trust that time hadn't yet betrayed. She wore a white dress with lace at the shoulders, the kind of dress worn for something important, or something sold as important. "She was mine," the woman said softly. "That's Adrian." The name cut the air in two. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew enough. What mattered now wasn't the file. It was the face. A face that had become a footnote in sealed courtrooms. A face Trump had laughed beside. A face that had waited decades to be named in public. The woman's voice broke. When I saw the footage, I wasn't sure at first, but then she turned her head, just a little, and I knew. It was her, my sister. Jasmine sat now, still no words, just presence. The woman reached across the table unsure. Jasmine met her halfway and took her hand firm, warm, steady. It was not a handshake. It was a bond, a promise. And in that moment, everything Jasmine had endured, the threats, the insults, the silence found its reason. She mattered, the woman said. No one ever said that out loud. Not in court, not on the news. But you showed the world she mattered. Jasmine blinked once. Her grip never loosened. The woman didn't cry. She'd done all that years ago. But she stood taller when she left, as if a piece of her had finally been returned. Jasmine watched her walk away, the envelope clutched tightly against her chest. When the door closed, the silence that remained wasn't hollow. It was sacred. What happens when the story ends but the memory begins? The lights in the CNN studio weren't soft. They were surgical, clean, bright, exposing. Jasmine Crockett sat beneath them without makeup touch-ups, without a script, without an entourage. Just her, a chair, and a camera blinking red. This wasn't spin. This wasn't a campaign. It was the last frame of a story that refused to be buried. The anchor's voice was steady, but laced with reverence. Congresswoman, after everything, after the tape, the walkout, the investigation, the threats, what do you want America to remember? Jasmine looked down for a moment, not to gather herself, but to choose the right words with the precision they deserved. Then she lifted her eyes not to the anchor, but directly into the lens. I want them to remember that silence, she said, is the most dangerous kind of power, because it protects the guilty and punishes the wounded. And the bravest thing you can do is break it. The studio didn't move, not even the crew behind the glass. Breaking it won't make you famous, she continued. It won't get you parades or safety. Sometimes it just makes you a target. But it also makes you free. And once you've tasted that kind of truth, you never go back. The anchor cleared her throat, visibly shaken. Do you believe justice will come? Jasmine didn't answer right away. Instead, she smiled, but it wasn't soft. It was quiet steel. I believe justice starts the moment someone tells the truth and doesn't flinch when the world tries to shut them up. Across the country, screens glowed in bedrooms, diners, buses. Phones buzzed. Timelines flooded. Clips from her hearing played on loop, her standing with the USB, her staring down, Trump, her whispering in the chamber after he fled. On TikTok, her quote about silence reached 2 million views in 12 hours. On Facebook, survivors stitched her voice over their own stories. This wasn't a headline anymore. It was a signal. Outside the studio, protesters still held signs beneath the darkening sky. She showed us the tape. Say her name, Adrian. Truth has a face now. But Jasmine didn't look out the window. She didn't need to. She had already said what she came to say. The segment ended. The cameras powered down. Staffers clapped respectfully, quietly. Jasmine stood, shook the anchor's hand, and left through the side exit. No press pool, no photo op. Just footsteps, deliberate and unafraid, as the Capitol loomed in the distance, waiting for its next reckoning. Because the noise would rise again. The spin would return. But the words she left behind would linger like a scar carved into the conscience of a nation. In a world of echoes, who dares to be the first voice? It began with a name spoken softly on a survivor form, then printed on a placard, then etched into a nonprofit charter. Martha's voice, named after Jasmine Crockett's grandmother, the woman who taught her how to hold a stare and when not to blink. It started with 10 survivors meeting in a church basement in Chicago. Then it became 30 in Atlanta, then hundreds across state lines. They weren't just marching anymore. They were organizing. Martha's voice launched a hotline, legal assistance, a scholarship fund for girls who'd been silenced by the same system that once tried to swallow Jasmine. They didn't build statues. They built clinics. They drafted affidavits. They found each other in the ashes and called it fireproofing. And while the movement rose from the street, a bill was introduced inside the very halls that once tried to crush her. The Crockett Bill for Congressional Transparency, a piece of legislation that would make sealed financial records connected to congressional hearings publicly accessible within 5 years. No more secret dockets. No more vanishing settlements. No more names erased with a wire transfer. Jamie Raskin sponsored it. AOC co-wrote the language. Cory Booker delivered the floor speech, but it was Jasmine's name across the top and the weight of every unheard voice beneath it. She stood on the Capitol steps when it was introduced. No podium, no teleprompter. Just her hands folded, looking out over the cameras and the faces beyond them. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about who comes next." Behind her, the protest signs had changed. No longer just about the tape or the hearings or the man who walked out. They read, "Truth needs teeth. No more sealed silence. We are not your contracts." The media tried to frame it as redemption. Jasmine refused the framing. "I don't want a redemption arc," she told a reporter. "I want a record. Something the next girl can point to and say, 'That's why I wasn't erased.'" In her district back home, schoolgirls painted murals of her grandmother, gray hair, stern eyes, hands on a Bible. And beneath it, one phrase in gold spray paint: "Silence ends with us." CNN aired a retrospective that week, "The Woman Who Brought Down the Wall." But even the anchor admitted it's not the wall that matters. It's what she built in its place. Jasmine didn't watch it. She was on a video call with a group of survivors in Arizona, helping them draft language for a local ordinance. Her suit was off. Her sleeves were rolled. Her voice was tired but steady. The kind of steady that comes from knowing the war didn't end. It simply changed shape. The Crockett bill passed committee the following Thursday. The nonprofit raised $2.4 million in its first 10 days. And the girl in the photo, the one named Adrian, was now being honored on a national survivor registry. Can one voice become a movement? The sun had begun its slow descent behind the Capitol dome, casting long, solemn beams across the stone. Shadows stretched across the steps like memories, some honorable, others still bleeding beneath the marble. Jasmine Crockett walked alone, her pace steady heels, tapping against the granite with a rhythm that was neither hurried nor hesitant. The building behind her had tried to silence stories like hers for generations, but now it held them, it carried them, and it would never unhear them again. She wore no coat, no campaign pin, no armor of politics. Her sleeves were rolled, her hands were bare. There were no aides whispering in her ear, no press corps trailing behind her, no security shadowing her steps. Just Jasmine and the weight of everything she refused to leave buried. She reached the bottom of the Capitol steps and paused. The structure loomed behind her, bathed in gold and shadow. It looked massive, eternal, untouchable, and yet she had touched it. Not with destruction, but with truth. Not with spectacle, but with clarity. She had entered through its guarded doors carrying a silver USB and left behind a rupture in its walls that no vote, no pundit, no backroom deal could seal shut. She turned slowly, letting the silence settle around her like a cloak. She faced the Capitol just for a moment, not to revere it, but to mark it, to remind it that it would never again be just a monument. It had become a record, a ledger of pain and reckoning. Then she turned toward the camera. Not with a smile, not with a tear, but with the same quiet defiance she carried into that hearing room the day she pressed play. He tried to erase them. We wrote them back in. Her voice didn't echo. It didn't need to. The words hung in the air like smoke from a candle that had burned all the way down. Behind her, the wind picked up. A lone protest sign lay abandoned against the lower rail, its cardboard soaked at the edges, the red marker slightly smudged but still legible. "Say her name, Adrian." A symbol not of closure, but of continuation. Jasmine walked forward again, each step softer now, her figure slowly swallowed by dusk. The Capitol loomed behind her, but it no longer cast the longest shadow. She did. No security, no lights. Just her and the memory of a battle fought in broad daylight, under oath, with every eye watching. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Because the story was no longer hers alone. It belonged to the girls who had vanished, the women who had survived, the names no longer redacted by power. It belonged to those still afraid to speak, but listening now for a voice that sounded like their own. Fade to black. A final line etched across the screen in white, slow, deliberate. For every voice buried in silence, this story is for you. Jasmine didn't walk for glory. She walked to write back the names of those erased from history. As the sun set behind the Capitol, she didn't end a hearing. She began a reminder that truth once spoken aloud never truly fades. If someone you love was once silenced, would you dare to speak for them now? If this story shook something and you don't just scroll past. Like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Truth Stories, where erased names find their voice and silence meets its reckoning. Tap the bell because the next story won't just reveal corruption, it might help rewrite history. What moment made you stop and hold your breath? Tell us in the comments because remembering isn't passive, it's power. This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and real people. All characters in dialogue are fictionalized for commentary and education. It is not intended to defame or mislead, but to inspire reflection and civic awareness. Thanks for watching. The truth didn't end here. It's still echoing, waiting for someone brave enough to listen and louder still to speak.